Well, thanks for joining us today. We've got a few things to go through, and one thing is that we're learning, which I'm not a huge fan of sitting and having to go through and watch PowerPoints. We're actually going to try using the website today to give you a little bit of interaction, also to kind of where to find things, where to locate products, and kind of how to navigate through it. It's not too difficult. So hopefully that'll be a little bit of a new thing for you guys. We're going to try and keep it to a half hour. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tom Cabazet. I can't see who all is attending, so I know some of you, I'm sure, I've met you face to face. And I've been with Lakos 23 years. I handle our industrial and heat transfer lines for the Western United States. So the presentation today is going to be centered around a settleable solid versus an actual solid that sinks. And we have varying products that you would apply to the types of solids that you may have in your application. Most of you that are attending today are going to be dealing with the heat transfer model, which typically is going to be dealing with condenser water, chilled water. Maybe every now and then you'll have intake water from pond or seawater that you're using too. So we'll talk about the products that actually apply to each of those types of debris that you're looking to remove. All of you are probably really familiar with our centrifugal separators, but we do have other lines and other things that we do offer that we'll get into today. So with that, we'll get started. As you can see on the screen right now, we have our basic website, just lakos.com. And most of the time, you're going to navigate through just the product section. And you'll see we have technically 4 markets. We have our industrial, HVAC, our irrigation, which deals a lot with the agriculture industry, and municipal, which is water that feeds residential typically. They'll have large municipal well sites that we have products that we sell into also. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the HVAC filtration line, which has a lot of products. I'm going to try and touch on most of them. Again, we're limited on time, so see what we can get through. So I'm going to start with floating solids. And what that entails is if you take a clear jar, I have a water bottle here. You could use the water bottle or anything. You can put the solids in it, shake it up really well, and then whatever settles, you'll see it. I don't have anything in this particular one. And whatever settles in 2 to 3 minutes, you'll see it on the bottom. That's where you'll end up using most of the time a non-barrier type filter, which would be our centrifugal separators. After that 2 to 3 minutes, what you see up above, or if there's discoloration still, then at that point, we want to look to a different type of filter, which is typically a barrier filter of sorts. So the settleable solids, or things that the separator cannot remove, the floating solids are the things that the separator cannot remove, and the settleable are what the separator can do. So let's start with our STS sand media filters. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the sand media filter, it literally uses sand that comes in, the dirty liquid comes into the top, it goes into the sand media filter, the sand filters it, and it has an under drain that the water is drawn through, and it goes back out to your process. So we have varying types of sizes, anywhere from 15 to 48-inch diameter tanks, and obviously the flows, they start out about, I think, 18 to 25 gallons a minute, and they can go up to 310 gallons a minute on this particular style. So the caveat with sand filters is they do use a lot of water during backwash. For example, on a 48-inch tank, if it goes into a backwash cycle at minimum once a day, you can dump up to 600 gallons during one of those cycles. They work really well for anything that's, call it 20 microns or the 40 micron range and smaller, down to about 5 microns. Again, lots of moving parts, actuators with alternating valves or 3-way valves that switch, a control panel that has your timers, backwash cycle counts. If you choose to do so, we can put PLCs in it and that type of thing. So sand media on cooling systems, it happens every now and then, but we prefer to migrate towards separator systems just because typically on buildings, they're not great at maintaining things to begin with. So that's the STS, which is a stainless steel. So now we'll migrate to the CTS, which you can see it looks a little bit different. These are our actual carbon steel sand filters, and they start out at a 54-inch tank. We actually manufacture a 42 and a 48, but most of the time, if you're going to go with these sizes, the smaller units, we'll end up using the stainless steel version. So on the 54-inch tanks, you can see it starts 54, and it goes all the way up to 96. And the number here, 318, 392, 474, just as you would see in the stainless steel, those are the design flow rates for each of those systems. They operate very similarly. I will point out with these, they do have pneumatic actuators. So if you're going to use a sand media filter to remove, again, call it your 40 micron and smaller particulate or material that floats, the separator can't remove, you're going to need air on site to operate these valves. We do have an option to use an electric actuator, but you'd have to request pricing if you choose to do that. So that would be another option for, again, a floating particulate or something that's very fine or small. Lots of pollens. You get iron oxides in your systems that when you have that orange color in your water, a lot of times when they're starting up a building, they don't passivate the piping, very well. You'll get that oxide buildup, and the sand media filters do really well at removing that. Even though when you think about it, that as a rust or a very fine particulate, it typically is too fine for the separator, and we're not going to clarify that water. So again, you'd end up using sand media typically on something like that. All right, so that's the sand media filtration. And then as we go down, which there was a whole presentation done not too long ago by one of our colleagues, Eric Swanson, we have self-cleaning screen filters. And these are a great product that can filter down to 5 microns also. The key with sizing these is we really need to know your ppm. We cannot really handle anything over 100 ppm, and the reason for that is it will continuously backwash. It'll plug up the screen, it'll blind off, and it creates a huge pressure differential. Then at that point, it just wants to backwash all the time or cycle through to flush. It'll self-clean. So real quickly, we'll get into kind of just the basic stages of it. Clean, it operates. You got a coarse screen up front if you use a dual screen unit. The water comes in. It goes through the finer screen, which is where you see this wand, and then the clean water goes back out. Once that screen builds up, internally, it hits a differential, and we'll open a valve to atmosphere, and what that'll do is it'll allow this wand to move inside where the screen is, and with the pressure differential, these little knobs, I'll call them here, will draw the material off the screen. It'll come out through here, and it'll flush to wherever your drain or tank possibly is. And then you can see here as that cycles through, it'll pull that material off, and this wand will move out, and you'll have a visual indicator at the end here where you can see the position of that wand. There's two options, basically, I want to make sure we point out. One is we can do an electric drive if the pressures are 35 psi or lower in the system, or if they're higher, it'll be a hydraulic versus electric drive. So if you guys decide, again, not to use the sand media filters, this is a good option for side stream typically. I don't suggest doing it for basin cleaning just because that screen can become overwhelmed. Some of the options with the screen, that's what the screen looks like internally. There's a centered mesh, or we have a wedge wire, which is kind of like a reinforced wound screen is the easiest way to really describe it. So there's that option also. Again, when you have floating solids, and if you have a finer material that the separator can't remove, we go to a barrier filter. Next, we will talk a little bit about the plus systems. So on the plus systems, as you can see, I'll make this a little bit bigger. With the plus systems, you can see we actually have, those of you that are familiar with our package systems, the TCX, the EHCX styles, we'll have a typical setup with a separator, but the separator is pre-filtering a cartridge filter. And these cartridge filters can go down to 0.35 microns. And that's an extremely fine material. It'll clear out biological when it comes to like cellular stuff. And so it could plug up quickly. So we want to try and pre-filter as much as we can. But if you have pollens, or if the water clarity is an issue and they can't get it down with just water treatment, or clear it up with just water treatment, the plus system has the cartridges, which again can take out as fine as 0.35, and I think we have up to about 20 micron cartridges, if I recall. So that's again pre-filtered side stream off of the clean water that comes off the separator. So we do have those that are optional also. The sizing is the same as what you do with your TC packages or your TB packages. Again, if you're familiar with those models, the only difference is you see a P in here, which stands for the plus side of it. We do sell a fair bit of these. We see that the microelectronics industry likes them. We've sold some government jobs, data centers. We've done some in Utah with, I believe it was eBay, that wanted the plus cartridges to make sure that the water was getting filtered down below the 10 micron level is where they were shooting for. So it's not something I think everybody's familiar with, thus me going through it here during the presentation. So and one of the other options that we do have, a lot of people don't know, is we do manufacture bag filters. Most of you are probably familiar with the solids recovery vessel, which I'll get into in just a minute. But we also have the bag filters. And this particular one, the housing itself is carbon steel, and they have 3 or 4 inch inlets, which the inlet is this, if you can see my cursor, and the outlet's here. And the bags are 8-inch diameter. They're like the SRB bags, but they're twice as long. They're 33 inch. They're like the 0833, which is the SRB we use on the EHCX packages. So bag filters, again, are great filters. We can get them down to typically 5 microns is the finest I suggest, just because they do or can blind off quickly. But on chilled water loops, we can build systems that have bag filters. We can pre-filter with separators like we did with the plus system I just showed you. So I want to make sure that we pointed this out. Flow rates can go up to about 450 gallons a minute, and that really plays a part in how fine the bag is and how dirty the water is. Because as the bags blind off, obviously your differential increases. And I think we end up suggesting somewhere starting at about 20 pounds of differential to really monitor the bags. The more you run through them at higher velocities, the material becomes embedded in them, and it's difficult to clean them or wash them. The bags are certainly a less expensive option as compared to cartridges. For example, the cartridges might run $250 each for a 5 micron or lower cartridge, and the bags run, a kit of them might be $60 to $100 for 10 of them. We have kits in quantities of 4 to 10. So bag filters obviously are a less expensive option in terms of maintenance. And the cartridges do have higher surface area, so they tend to last longer than what the bags do. All right, and then the one that you're probably more familiar with, let's go here. So the EHCX is what I'm going to show you because it's under accessories, would be the solids recovery vessels. Now these utilize the same bags as the bag filter I was just showing you. This is a 33-inch bag, and it's 8-inch diameter, and these are standard on the E-series packages. Or on the older style TC packages, it's a 8-inch diameter bag that's 16 inches long, this is probably the one that most everybody's familiar with. Again, we've built small systems for smaller chilled water loops where they just wanted to use bags versus having a separator. They do work well because closed loops typically don't have a lot of large debris in them. It's finer and it's darker in color. It's not just this pristine, whether it's glycol or just chilled water alone on its own. The bag filters do a good job of cleaning those loops up. And again, we can skid them with the pump, the bag filter, a good control box, the motor starter part of it also. So, all right, so that's in a whole, or in a nutshell, that's most of the equipment that we do have for the solids that float or that are finer than the 40 microns, which the separator can handle. All right, so I'll continue on now. We're going to change gears and we're going to go to the products that actually handle the material that settles. And again, just like I said with the stuff that's on the bottom, that's what we're going to start talking about now. And you'll find most cooling tower basins are going to have that dirt that's settled in the basin. You're going to have the scale and the debris that's broken off the fill. The airborne debris tends to settle out pretty well. But if you have a lot of pollens, like I said earlier, then the separator won't handle the pollens. So you may want to put in a solids recovery vessel instead of an auto blowdown valve to help maybe get some of that pollen out too. So then we'll go to products. And let's start with just the EHCX separator. So as you know, we have separators that can be sold just on their own. And typically we're doing that if you're running them in full flow filters. So those of you that have seen a couple of the presentations that I've done, we've talked about the application for full flow, side stream, and basin cleaning. The individual separators that I want to point out, the EHCX series, the difference between those and the standard HTX, drop the E, is the efficiency. We probably, or you may have heard or have read it on the literature itself, that the E series products are 98% of 44 microns with 2.6 specific gravity, that's the weight of the material we're trying to remove. And specific gravity, for those of you that don't know, all that is it's how many times heavier than water. Water's 1, so in this case sand is 2.6, so it's 2.6 times heavier than water, and that's why obviously it will settle. So with the EHCXs, we're targeting the 44 microns and up. And the flow ranges, they start at 15, and they can go as high as, in this case, it's showing up to 950 gallons a minute. If you still want to maintain that 44 micron model to try and remove those, then we would run these in parallel, which if I pull up real quick. If you do require higher flows, we would actually take this particular picture. I'll zoom in a little bit here, where we would set up the separators in parallel. So this one might be doing, the maximum, let's say 950, and if the flows are at 1800, then we would have 2. If they're larger than 1800, then we would end up having a third one on there. So if you guys do want to do full flow and stay with 44 micron removal, just contact the factory and we can help you set up a system that you're able to run in parallel. We don't have pricing for that in the standard price list. So that's the EHCX. So if we go back to products, I'm going to click on the HTX and HTH. I will note that on the EHTX separators, they are all built standard accessible. With just the HTX and HTH, anytime you see an X in our nomenclature, that means it has a removable top. The HTH is welded shut. It's a little bit tough to see, but in this case, you can see that there is a weld on the top of that. Now, the difference between this and the EHTX is we're really targeting 98% of 74 microns is where we kind of start with. It will remove finer than that, but that's my differentiating point. And so we're targeting 74 microns at 98% removal at 2.6 specific gravity. So 74 micron is still a very fine particulate. For those of you that have been dealing with Lakos for a long time, we do have the little packets, the yellow and orange packets with the sand that's been sieved. And they're both, we have one with 44 and we have one with 74. So if you guys want those packets, speak to your regional manager and we can potentially get some of those out to you. They're really helpful. I don't have one in front of me, but it can show the actual size of the particulate. So your customers, the owners, or if you're talking to maybe a contractor asking, what does this do? You can show them how fine that really is. It's surprising at how well these separators work with the 44 micron particulate. So that's the main difference between the EHTX and the HTX and HTH. And these actually have, let me go back here, a higher flow range. If you look, we start at 16 and we can go as high as 12,750 gallons a minute through a single unit. So these, you have a much broader range. And with the EHTX, again, we're limited up to about 1,000. I think we have one that might go up to 1,400 gallons a minute. We don't necessarily publish it, but if you do have something that runs higher than that, just talk to your regional manager and we can potentially get you specs for that. So let's continue with the products. Again, this is the stuff that we're dealing with that settles. I'm going to run, we talked about the Plus system. Again, that has the separator on it and it has the cartridge filter. So it's kind of a combined product where you can have the settleable solids removed and then also have a device that's able to get some of that floating material too. So with that said, we're going to move to the EHCX, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with these. Again, it's a complete package. Typically, we're going to use these as a side stream off your condenser water loop or as a basin cleaning unit. Again, settleable solids. If you want to have a solids recovery vessel, they are available. And again, that's an accessory bag filter to collect the material that the separator removes. As you can tell, this is the solids handling equipment. Off the discharge of the separator, the difference on the plus package, we pre-filtered that water, and then there was a side stream off that pre-filtered water with the cartridges. So this is seeing a much heavier burden of that settleable material than what your cartridge filter would see. Again, that cartridge filter, think of it as a polishing filter to help bring the clarity of that water up, and also to grab that stuff that does float. So the EHCX, again, same separators that we just talked about. I'm sorry, the EHCX uses the EHCX separators that are the 44 microns is what we're targeting at 98% removal. So again, flow rates, they vary. We start out about 50 gallons a minute. And again, for those of you that aren't familiar with their nomenclature, the X, again, is accessible, that's the only thing that's available with the E series. They start out at 50 gallons a minute for a system, and they'll go up to about 900, if I recall. And the largest would be 900 gallons a minute. So if you need something larger than that, most of the time we're going to end up plumbing them in parallel, like I showed you with that the EHCX brochure. And then we'll put them on a skid, and we'll size the pump accordingly if you need higher flows than what this is. As an example, we just did a job with my rep out of Phoenix for a local hospital there, and they needed 1,500 gallons a minute for an in-ground sump that were sweeping the basins. And we ended up running 2 separators in parallel to get that full 1,500 gallons a minute. And we put them on a package skid with strainers and control panels and that kind of thing. So don't just think that because we're limited by this 910 gallons a minute. If you want that E-Series system, we can certainly make a customized system for you. So go back to products again. So the TCX and TCI, again, the X is accessible for bids that you know are going to be competitive. And typically, again, for our solids that settle, again, we only have the separator on here. We would go into the TCI model. So that's the lowest cost version that we have if you're competitive, or if you know that there's going to be other people bidding it. I would suggest probably going in with this, especially if we're not the basis of design on the spec. More than likely, we're going to go to this product. But again, we're targeting the 74 microns with just the standard TCX because it has a non-E series. It has just that HTX separator that we were talking about earlier. Again, flow ranges start at 30 gallons a minute with this one, and we can go as high as 1,670 gallons a minute with the package systems that's right out of our price. Out of our price list. All right, to make sure we're not missing anything there. So products, and then lastly, I didn't bring this up, but I will bring it up. So for a side stream version of this, the last ones we were looking at had that T, which is typically going to be your basin cleaning version. But if you want to run off a condenser water loop as a side stream, again, here's your separator, pre-filtering, taking out those solids that sink, and then that clean liquid will come in, go through the cartridge, and that runs back to the pump suction. You can kind of see it here a little bit. So we do have side stream versions of those plus packages, again, with the cartridges. And the cartridges filter anywhere from 30 up to, I think we go as high as 50 or 60 gallons a minute with 2 of these. Some of the larger packages will have 2 of those. So again, we're coming up on the end of this here. So what we'll do, again, I'll just recap it. Settleable solids, you're typically going to focus on your separators, the centrifugal separator, and then anything that floats, if you do have a lot of those or a lot of material that's floating or that's too fine for the separator, we're going to, again, go into our barrier type filters, which we talked about the sand media filters, we talked about the cartridges, we talked about the bag filters, the self-cleaning screens, and then lastly, which I just looked at my notes, we have the pump intake screens also. This is an industrial screen filter. And what this will do is this goes down in a pond or a canal or possibly a lake, maybe a river. It needs to be fairly deep. But we do have these intake screens, again, for all the floating debris that you don't want coming into your pumps. So I encourage you to check those out. They range anywhere from 350 up to 2,700 gallons a minute for single units, and we can plumb them with manifolds if we have higher flow ranges. So some of you may not have been aware that we do have those self-cleaning intake screens. And what happens is there's a little wand inside here that rotates, or the screen rotates, and that wand will spray all the material off as that pump tries to draw the water in from its suction line. We appreciate you guys attending. It looks like we had a pretty good audience today. Hopefully that kind of helps you differentiate between what product to use when you have either finer material that we need to use barrier filtration for, or if we're just targeting that typical stuff that gets into cooling systems. Again, the centrifugal separator is a very good option for that with zero to very low maintenance with a product like that, whereas your barrier filters are going to require some sort of maintenance over a period of time. All right, with that, guys, we appreciate you attending. We look forward to finally getting out and seeing you guys face to face. All of us regional managers are excited to get back out there and start visiting customers with you and walking job sites and getting our hands dirty again. Thanks for attending. You all have a great day.